Good afternoon. I'm in the field of sexual abuse, so I think I don't want anybody to be offended, but I'm very, very pleased that there are some people who've survived till the end of the day, and thank you for staying for the last session. I'm speaking first of all on behalf of Ms. Hava Levi, who is the Chief Child Protection Social Worker in Israel. She apologizes for not being here, and the words that I'm going to say were written together with her. The issue of the media takes up a lot of a child protection officer's time and a lot of Hava Levi's time, and it was very important for me to give you a sincere reflection of things that she would like to be said. I'm also here as a social worker, as a rather ancient child protection social worker, and I certainly am speaking on behalf of social workers throughout the country. Not just social workers who do statutory work, but also social workers who are trying their best in medical, in social services settings, in all sorts of settings all around the country. And that was the viewpoint that Kalmit asked me to express this afternoon when we talk about the media. I think the first point that I would like to get across is that, unfortunately, I don't think there are any journalists in the audience, but we would really like the media to be taking a leading role in educating the public, in bringing child maltreatment to the forefront of public interest. We would like the serious press in Israel to be taking a serious stand on debating what is best for our children, what is best for our child protection policies, what is the way we would like to see our children treated in this country. I don't see any debate today in any field, not just anything to do with child protection. There is no real debate in how we want our schools to be seen, how we want our children to be growing up, what sort of screen exposure or internet exposure we really want for our children, and even less debate about how we as a society, what sort of boundaries we would like to draw and say this is a situation where none of us in our society are prepared for children to carry on having to live mainly at home, but we know that abuse is also not just at home. There is no attempt at serious debate today in the media, and I think it's a serious lack. I think it's also a serious negative reflection on where we stand today as a society. Kalmit gave you the figures before. Occasionally we see an article which says it's an investigative reporting article. I do this because it's usually 7, 8, 9, 10 interviews of people who believe in one position. It's not an investigative article. Investigative articles need to present different sides to a problem. They need to present academic sides to a problem. They need to bring research findings. If we really want serious journalism and we want an academic and a deep understanding of the issues of child maltreatment, we need to do serious reporting. And unfortunately, that is not happening today, to my understanding. We have seen, not just abroad, but also in Israel, how when the media really, I'll say, get their act together and take a serious interest in child maltreatment issues, they've made a real difference. Most of the people in the audience remember in 1989 a small 3-year-old girl called Moran Mias was killed. She was beaten to death by her uncle in Tiberias, and she was the trigger, not only for very, very sad reporting about her personal case, but in that case, the media managed to step outside the original private case of Moran and be very, very foremost in making sure that the mandatory reporting legislation, which was very, very swiftly for Israeli standards, was legislated not long afterwards. From the private case, the individual case, the sensational case, the media was quite instrumental in making sure that a new age of child protection dawned. And I think this is the sort of positive role that child protection that the media should be playing in a society that cares about its children, and certainly about child maltreatment. Certainly, over the years, both social services and the media have raised serious questions that need to be looked into about the standards of child protection, about what we should be doing in child protection, about our services, about our out-of-home placements, about our community services. And I certainly as a Ministry of Welfare employee think that we need to be investigating ourselves, we need to be changing things, we need to be improving things, but we should be doing some of that debating about how, if not all of it, also in the media. And that the dialogue should be open, it should be serious, and it should be in-depth. The issue of child maltreatment is a difficult and wide issue, and I said before, it covers many, many fields, not just the field of social services. I think if we really want to know what we want best for our children, in health, in social services, in welfare, in safety, we need to cover the whole range of the offices. But I think the hardest part of child maltreatment is child maltreatment in a child's family. And unfortunately, these are the cases which in recent years are the ones that Kalmit mentioned. These are the cases which are being presented in a very sensational but extremely episodic way. The case itself is presented, the issues surrounding the case, the larger issues, the more complicated issues, the issues that social services are dealing with, but society as a whole has to deal with, are not being delved into almost at all. We're talking about an age of creating news. The journalist is creating a big news spin regarding an awful and generally very rare case of child abuse, and he's not able to step out of one case and start dealing with the problem as a social phenomenon, as a wider problem, and as an issue which has to be on the front pages of the newspaper. It's almost impossible today to talk openly about parental difficulties, about the dysfunction of certain families that will always, and I agree with you, our speaker this morning, Professor Katz, I would love to do a restart for the whole of our child protection services. But I understand that we can't. I'd also like to do it regarding the media, I have to say. But in terms of, there will always be children that will not be able to grow up in their home settings. But there's no debate about that. There's no discussion about, there's no even recognition of that. As a society, we don't like to say that there will be a group of children that we as a society will want to protect from the intrafamilial awful maltreatment that's going on there. And it has to be said. I think it's something that has to be said. It has to be said out loud. It has to be recognized. And I think it also has to be put in context. Because if the media is reporting the awful, sensational, rare cases, then an ordinary parent who is feeling really frustrated with their children won't be able to ask for help. Because the whole vision of social services that they're getting is this is all extreme, immediate removal from home, all children are placed out of home, all social workers are bad. This is the message which is coming across from the media today. The other problem with presenting individual cases, and we at the moment are having a real, we're very disappointed about some of the reporting, and I would like a reset of the media because of this, is that because journalists are insisting on reporting the individual cases, they're getting very, very angry with social services and saying, look, we want to report this individual case. Why aren't you responding? Oshad will talk about the legal framework. We know why we're not responding. We know that the law demands all of us, including the journalists, to protect a child and a family's privacy. And the child has siblings and the child has grandparents. We live in a very small country. Even when children's faces have been turned front to back and bludged out, almost everybody who lives certainly in the child's local neighborhood is able to recognize a child in this country, and we are not able to talk about individual cases. But when we say to the media, we'd like to talk about the phenomenon of children at severe risk, we'd like to talk about the phenomenon of children being sexually abused by their family members, that's not interesting. That's not yellow, that involves investigative journalism, that involves a bit more work, that might be a little bit less sensational, and those articles are not being published. The media should be helping to educate the public about the devastating effects of child maltreatment and promoting understanding of the phenomenon. That is the role of the media. And in our country at the moment, that is not happening. I have to say that I've seen, I certainly read examples from Europe and from England, where over the last few years they've managed to change the trend a little bit from always looking for the social worker to blame and to start looking at the phenomenon and making campaigns in the media about the phenomenon of child maltreatment. These campaigns are life-saving. When we read that in the 1970s, 80s, 90s of the previous century, people started writing publicly about sexual abuse. Many children and adults hadn't known what it was that was happening to them, hadn't had a name for what it was that was happening to them, couldn't tell anybody what it was that was happening because they could barely tell it to themselves. And the publicity regarding these phenomena is absolutely vital and life-saving, and that is the role of the media. Campaigns for better services, funding, all the rest of it. If the media was doing a serious job, we would love to take part, and I think today we also should be debating about changes in legislation, changes in our child protection policies, and we should be doing it also, some of it should be done over the media. Just a word about the social media. If the established media are presenting very sensationalized individual reports, in the social media everything is just absolutely fallen apart. We have several internet sites which are just, I mean, there are pictures there of children in concentration camps. They're not in concentration camps, they're in boarding schools or in foster families. There's social workers who are deemed unsuitable and inefficient and unprofessional are named by name. The judges are named by name. This is shaming. There is a lot of shaming going on. There is blackmail. There are threats to social workers. The legal advice that we have is that it's almost impossible to do anything about this. We have demonstrations underneath social workers' houses. All this is extremely effective. This year, 4 child protection social workers have returned their credentials to the state and stopped doing child protection social work. I know most of them, they are a severe loss to the children in need that they should have been able to help, but Israel is a small country. The internet is a dangerous place. These public accusations are on our phones, as we know, and I don't blame any social worker for saying I can't protect children anymore if I'm not protected myself. So this is a serious problem, and because Israel is such a small country and things are very catching here, we really need to stop and start again and do child maltreatment and the media as it should be done. A word of hope maybe. Yesterday there was a study day in one of our long-term treatment centers for children who've been sexually abused. The subject of the day was children who've been sexually abused, sibling abuse. A very serious reporter arrived. He took his work very seriously. He interviewed people, he interviewed the lecturers. He didn't ask for one single story. He was also knew very clearly that we don't tell stories, we talk about phenomenon. Every child can fit into a phenomenon somewhere, and I hope that there'll be a serious article, at least 1 or 2, that will be published. I'm looking forward to the debate and the questions afterwards. Thank you.